Thank you very much for that warm introduction. It's very nice to see all of you here in Washington. Sounds like you've had a very good day, and I wish you a very good set of meetings while you're here. It's a real pleasure to actually to talk to all of you. As you've already indicated, I've had a great time being able to go around the country and actually talk to many different chapters, and really appreciate the work that you do. And again, glad that you're here in Washington. And so it's an exciting time to be here. In particular, I think I will highlight just a couple different issues while I'm here, and then make sure that we're able to cover enough in Q&A. The first issue is to say that I want to give you an update, because you're already well versed in our work in the United Nations. You already know what we do. I don't have to sing to the choir in a sense. But what I want to do is give you a sense of some of the key issues that we're working on, some of the key challenges, and then really get your ideas. First off, as you know, it's an important day, and the Secretary is actually up at the Security Council. She will have just completed, if they're on time, the session at the Security Council on the Arab Awakening. As you know, the United Kingdom is in the chair for the Security Council this month. Each country has a thematic discussion, and this month in particular wanted to highlight the Arab Awakening, and so that actually Foreign Minister, United Kingdom Foreign Minister Haig is in the chair. He asked the other foreign ministers to come, so this Secretary Clinton went up today and will deliver remarks, which are now up and posted and available, so you can see what she said. We're really talking about the importance of working together on next steps in the region, but also on using the UN. I think it's emblematic of the approach in that that she saw it was important to be seen with her colleagues at the United Nations, together talking about how we're dealing with the important challenges of the Arab Awakening. The second point is to say that when we look at some of the most difficult issues, I'll just highlight a few just to give you an update of what we're grappling with. The first is Syria, and I'll just sort of touch on that, but happy to go larger into question and answer about that, particularly about that. As you know, that we've tried to look at how we, both as a nation, but working with other countries, could be able to address the challenges in Syria. That we've not been able to pass a resolution in the Security Council. Obviously, the veto of Russia and China meant that we've not been able to use the central peace and security institution for the Syria issue. That said, we've tried to be as nimble as possible to use the tools that we do have. And here I'd highlight the work of the Human Rights Council. You all know and heard me talk about the Human Rights Council at various points over the past 2.5, 3 years. But I think that because the United States was in the Human Rights Council, we were able to make the body more agile. Still imperfect, still problematic, but it meant that when we needed to turn to the Human Rights Council to talk about Libya, to talk about Cote d'Ivoire, to talk about key issues, it was there. And this is true in the case with Syria. And so that there were 3 special sessions on human rights in Syria last year. And I was just in Geneva last week for the most recent special meeting on Syria held at the beginning of the high-level week for the Human Rights Council. And it reminds us that it matters what we do all year in the UN system in order to be able to have these instruments available when there's a crisis. Now, we think we should actually have a Security Council resolution. We'll continue to work on that. That's going to be extremely difficult. We'll talk about that. But we're trying to say what mechanisms can we use to call global attention to what's going on in Syria, and clearly a UN mechanism is at the center of that. There are also important other elements, including obviously the Friends of Syria and the key role of the Arab League, and the role that it's playing in terms of expressing the views of states in the region. And I think one of the things that I find interesting particularly is that this relationship between the global body and regional organizations we think will be particularly important. It's something we identified 3 years ago, and some of you have heard me talk about the organization just within my bureau, but we created a new office that looks just at regional organizations, and indeed now we're finding the relationship with the Arab League, the African Union, and other aspects are particularly important, and that's important in our response to Syria. We're also continuing our work on trying to grapple with the budget finance issue. Like I say, you're probably hearing a bit about that on the Hill, but just to know that this is also part of what we do on a regular basis. Again, what we do all year. What I've tried to say in terms of our work on congressional issues is that the members of Congress hear from us all year. It's clearly budget season. The Secretary was just out talking about the budget, but we actually spend around the year briefing on the peacekeeping budget, but then also briefing on other budget priorities. So very little should be news by the time we actually get to budget season in particular. But I'd be interested to hear what your reactions are in particular. Then that if we look at our next set of challenges. It's interesting if I take some of the issues in Syria and look at what's going on in the Human Rights Council as well. And one of the questions is how we actually deal with the challenge of meeting global responsibilities while dealing with the challenges of rethinking sovereignty. And I think one of the issues, and I'm interested in your reflections, that I think will be important for us is defending the gains we've made so far. Because I think that now that we've been active on peace and security issues and in the Human Rights Council as well, that we're finding that some of the states who are unhappy with the activism of the United States are looking for ways to try to thwart the effort of continued activism. So I think it'll be important that we continue to make the case that it's important for the United States to be vocal and active, and that we are that we're able to continue to work across blocks. And the challenge here is that we're often the one making the difficult case, or often the one making the unpopular case as well. And so we're continuing to work on that, but we're finding that while we addressed many challenges over the past 2 or 3 years, that the backlash factor is something we have to take into account. And so that one of the things we're trying to make sure here is that we continue to maintain full diplomatic support for making the hard choices in UN bodies. That usually means working closely with my regional colleagues, and that I think I hope is one of the innovations in how we work, which is being able to say in capitals what we're saying in New York and Geneva. And so that we spend a lot more time, in fact, when I get back to it, I'll be joining the section for another meeting where we're sitting down with the regional bureaus looking at a set of strategies. And we're thinking that's going to be increasingly important to defend the work that we've done in different UN bodies. So. So you've probably also heard me over the years be usually usually try to be quite on the forefront issue, but I think it's also important that I say that we continue to defend the progress that is made. Then I want to turn to an issue that's often taken up in a negative sense, but I actually would say we're actually trying to take up in a positive sense. And this is the question of how we approach UN reform efforts. And I was going to say we actually take this as trying to look at how we strengthen the institution. And I was going to share with you that in addition to the work that we've been doing with Untie and Untied 2, which is the initiative on transparency issues, that we're also looking at how we think about effectiveness and how, because we think it's actually important that you're not just talking about randomly about reform, but you actually say what is the objective of each organization, how do you work with that organization, and tie its objectives to do that. So we've become more active in some of the donor-based bodies that we haven't been involved in that are involved in effectiveness. And a good example is an organization called NOPAN, which is about to become part of the OECD, which is again a donors group. And we're trying to find those mechanisms where we're able to be closer to other donors who can help echo our message. That goes back to our point about defending the gains in particular, that we try to find the other partners that will also be echoing our message. And we're trying to do that even in the UN reform area. Now, and I think also that part of that is also to try to turn the argument, which is sometimes viewed to try to be used against us, to say no, actually, that that would all support having a more effective UN system and being more active on the reform front. Looking out over the year, that some of the particular challenges will continue to be, as I say, the issues on the agenda, such as Syria, and on the budget issues as well. We'll also have the election to the Human Rights Council, which will also be, I think, particularly interesting. We have to get elected by all members of the General Assembly, so I think that'll be particularly a challenge as well. And finally, we're also looking at how we help support the leadership transition. As you know, the Secretary General is in his second term, and we, as you know, the U.S., along with other member states, have been trying to be very supportive of having a dynamic leadership team up in New York. So we were particularly heightened to hear the most recent announcements of the Deputy Secretary General Jan Eliasson. Many of you will know him from when he was as ambassador of Sweden here to the United States, but also know that he's had a long career in the United Nations. And Susanna Melchiorra, former Undersecretary General, sorry, still currently Undersecretary General for Field Support Services, to be his Chief of Staff. We think these are excellent and give it a sense of the direction the Secretary General is going, and we're encouraging him to continue to appoint people of that caliber of leadership, because we think leadership matters actually in the UN system. So as I say, we're both trying to continue to be active on the peace and security side, also trying to continue to be active on the Human Rights Council side. There are a variety of other issues I'm happy to go with in terms of particular points. If you want to talk about Rio Plus 20, I'm happy to do that, or other things or initiative on the agenda. But I want to reassure you that multilateral diplomacy remains very much the center of the administration's foreign policy. We're still actively involved in a variety of issues that probably IO didn't get involved in the past, and that we're both continuing to try to work on the main things we've been working on for years that you know well, but we're also trying to be smart about defending the gains we've made as well, because some of the states weren't so happy about how active we were. So I will stop there. I really want to have a conversation with you and answer your questions in that.